Hello everyone, I'm here. Today's question is, how far has the danger of DNA modification gone? Is it possible for genetic engineering to turn children into superhumans? Should we allow scientists to perform such experiments on children? And what exactly are they hiding from us? You'll find answers to these and other questions in this video. Everything will be as usual, based on real events. We will talk about the experiments conducted by the American doctor Josiah Zayner on his own children. This case caused a huge scandal and gave rise to many ethical questions. But first things first. What kind of experiments was this doctor doing, and why? Josiah Zayner is a former biochemist and geneticist who works at the NASA Ames Research Center. He became famous when he announced that he would modify the genome of his unborn child using CRISPR technology. This genetic editing tool allows scientists to delete or modify any gene. At first, Zander just wanted to make his kid resistant to HIV, but then he decided to go further and actually create a superhuman baby. He called his project Baby DIY. As part of it, the scientist modified 3 genes of his daughter, making her resistant not only to HIV but also to malaria. But that wasn't enough for him. The next time he decided to modify 4 more genes. In total, there were 7 changes to the girl's DNA. Her father believed that this would make her smarter, prettier, and healthier than other children. But how did he manage to get away with it? You see, there's a whole system of checks and balances in place to prevent any medical personnel from conducting such experiments. However, they only apply to clinical trials involving patients. And the doctor didn't do any of that. He simply edited the genes of his already born daughter at home. And even though his actions were condemned by the international scientific community, they couldn't do anything to punish him because his daughter wasn't subjected to clinical trials. She just underwent regular medical checkups like every other child, and all the tests showed that she was healthy. However, doctors who examined the baby suspected that something was wrong with her genes, but they couldn't prove it. After all, new gene editing technologies can't be detected in conventional genetic tests. The only way to figure out if the baby's DNA had been modified was to conduct a genome sequencing. But that method hadn't been invented yet. It was only a few years later that scientists developed a new sequencing technology called next-generation sequencing, which made it possible to read the entire genome of a human being. And it was then that the doctor's secret was revealed. Zayner had planned everything in advance and understood that sooner or later someone would try to study his daughter's genome. That's why before the birth of the baby, he created a special foundation called the Human Genome Project to popularize genetic engineering education. Through this organization, he raised $40,000, which he spent buying equipment for genome sequencing. When the results were ready, he published them and said that he wanted to share them with the world so that everyone could learn something new. But in fact, he just wanted to hide his own involvement in the experiment. Now, a couple of years have passed since then, but the scientist's daughter still remains anonymous. We don't know anything about her apart from the fact that she's perfectly healthy, so it turns out that modifying genes can be useful. But is it ethical? And most importantly, should we let our scientists go even further and create superhumans? What's happening in the field of genetic engineering today? The Chinese scientist Jiankui may have an answer for us. In 2018, he stunned the world by announcing that he'd created the first genetically modified babies. Jiankui studied at the prestigious University of Beijing and worked at a major university hospital. He received his PhD in the USA and then returned to China, where he opened his own lab. His colleagues respected him and the government supported him. So when Jiankui told reporters that he'd modified the DNA of twins, no one doubted him. And the scientist himself was very proud of his achievement. He said that he'd edited the genes of the twins so they'd be resistant to HIV. Unfortunately, we don't know the full story behind this experiment. The Chinese authorities kept it secret for quite a long time, but what we know for sure is that Jiankui acted without permission. Even his own boss didn't know about the experiment. The scientist was accused of conducting clinical trials without the necessary permits, misusing the CRISPR technology and violating a number of other laws. And after that, he mysteriously disappeared. The last time anyone saw him was on December 6, 2018, when he left the city of Shenzhen with 2 unidentified people. Since then, no one knows where he is. Some say that he's hiding from the police, while others believe that he's abroad. Anyway, the Chinese authorities officially put the scientist on the wanted list. As for the twins, they live an ordinary life like any other kids. They don't feel different from their peers, and they don't even know about their unique experiment. Their parents agreed to take part in Jiankui's experiment voluntarily. They wanted to have a baby resistant to AIDS because both of them were HIV carriers. The thing is that in China, there's a law prohibiting couples with HIV from having kids. So now what? Do we need to wait until some evil scientist decides to play God? Or maybe it's already too late and we're just unaware of it. Here's an example from history that shows how fast genetic engineering can develop. In 1973, Paul Berg managed to create the first recombinant DNA molecule. At that time, it seemed like science fiction. But just 15 years later, in 1988, the US company Genentech released the first genetically engineered drug, human insulin. In 2018, more than 200 of these drugs were sold around the world, helping millions of people suffering from diabetes. Scientists don't stop there, though. For example, George Church from Harvard Medical School believes that soon we'll be able to cure serious diseases like Alzheimer's using genetic engineering. Other scientists think that someday we'll be able to increase muscle mass, improve vision, and extend our lifespan using the same methods. But will we go even further and create superhumans? Here's what the British psychologist Oliver Curry thinks. People with high intelligence tend to use contraception and not have kids, which means that future generations will be less intelligent. Those who decide to become parents often want to give their kids an advantage in the struggle for existence. For this reason, it's likely that genetic engineering will help increase the average IQ of humanity. If this happens, we'll face a number of social problems. For example, how will society treat people who haven't undergone genetic modifications? Will they consider them inferior? If yes, then sooner or later they'll start segregating them. Perhaps the most terrifying thing is that genetic engineering can lead to the emergence of new diseases. Genetically modified humans could become defenseless against viruses that we don't even know about yet. But there's another problem. Most people are unaware of all the risks associated with genetic engineering. This is because scientists don't tell us the whole truth. Take, for example, the Harmlessness Project. It was launched by the British geneticist Peter Medawar. Its purpose was to create a strain of harmless mice for medical research. This meant that the animals wouldn't feel pain or develop complications from surgery. Sounds great, right? Well, then what's the problem? Medawar removed a gene responsible for the production of the brain chemical endorphin. Endorphins reduce the sensation of pain. That's why people who produce a lot of endorphins can withstand incredibly high temperatures and severe injuries without losing consciousness. It's almost like they're immune to pain. But there's a downside to this. Mice without endorphins didn't feel pain, but they also didn't experience pleasure anymore. They became apathetic and uninterested in food, which led to starvation. After realizing what they'd done, the scientists abandoned the project, but it wasn't the only one. In the 70s, researchers at the Salk Institute in California tried to create a mouse that wouldn't feel pain. They modified a different gene, but the result was the same. The mice didn't feel anything at all, good or bad. But here's the problem. No one knows what other consequences this or that genetic modification may have. We might be removing one negative trait, but in exchange, we'll get a bunch of others. It's scary to even think about what might happen if we try to create a superhuman. In fact, we can't predict the consequences of any genetic modification. But scientists claim that they can take risks and go further. They say that humanity is on the verge of creating designer babies. Parents will be able to choose the appearance of their future child, their gender, height, build, and even intelligence. And if we manage to overcome all the difficulties, we'll open a new page in the history of mankind. What do you think about this? Write your answers in the comments below. And if you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more. This was Adam, and you've been watching your channel, Valley of Knowledge. Stay curious, and see you in the next one.